So like I mentioned, there were 13 books that I read in the month of, let me just get my coffee everywhere. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my August wrap up. So August was a fantastic reading month. I was able to get basically everything, almost everything that I had wanted to read in the month. All the main things that I wanted to get done in the month of August, I was able to read. I let some mood reading take over. Like basically my plans for August was to create a TBR that I was excited about, but also like just let the mood reading hit so that I was like in the zone for September when the Magical Readathon takes place. And I think we did it. Like I am so ready. Like a couple of days before September started, I had to like force myself to not pick up the reads that I had planned for my Magical Readathon / September month because like I just wanted to keep reading. So that's, I feel like, a very good testament of how good this month was. But we have 13 books to talk about. Without further ado, let's talk about the stats. So like I mentioned, there were 13 books that I read in the month of August, which was over 3,421 pages and 91 and a half-ish hours listened, which was 3 audiobooks, 2 ebooks, 3 physical books, and 5 mixed. I think this is the first month this year that we've had something in every single one of those categories. Age categories also were spread out a little bit because we had 3 YA books and then 10 adult books. Genres, again, there's quite a few more this month. We had 3 fantasy, 1 mystery or thriller, 4 romance, 4 contemporary, and 1 nonfiction. And then ratings. We had 2 5 stars, yay, 7 4 stars, and 4 3 stars. So all pretty normal for me as far as like the ratings go, but it made me feel great. So the first book that I finished in the month of August was one that I've already kind of talked about because it is The Shadow Cabinet by Juno Dawson, which was the final book in my 5-star predictions vlog that I did at the very beginning of the month. So I'll leave that linked above if you haven't seen it already. But this was the very last book in that. There was 2 books in that vlog, and this was the last one. So I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. Trigger warnings in this book for misogynistic language, like that's a big part of the plot. Sexual assault, it's all historical, but like people are remembering that it happened. Domestic abuse and mentions of miscarriage. So this series does not shy away from the hard stuff. I've talked a lot about this series. The first one is Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which I read a couple of years ago when it came out, and I loved it so much that I really wanted to get to the others, and I just hadn't made time for it. And now I have. So in the first book, it basically takes place in like the UK, and in this world, the HMRC, which in reality is like the tax government or something, or the tax branch of the government. In this world, it stands for Her Majesty's Royal Coven, and it is the ruling party of witches. And so you have witches and warlocks, and witches are more powerful. And so the first book really kicks off with these 5 or so women who were friends when they were younger, really 4, and then people that they have like their significant others that they brought into the fold. But 4 girls or women who, when they were young, kind of grew up together in the same town, and they've all kind of separated and gone their separate ways. One of them is high priestess, or like the ruling party of the government. One is a vet in a small town. One is married and just is happy to be like a housewife, and like her husband doesn't know that she has magical powers. And one did not like the way that Her Majesty's Royal Coven was doing things, so she branched off and created her own separate coven that she calls Diaspora, and it's basically like more inclusive. And so it's the 4 of them kind of coming back together because there's this big bad thing that's supposed to like kick off all events. It's supposed to be like there's a really bad guy and he went away and now he could possibly come back, and there's supposed to be this kid who is going to set off those events, and the high priestess woman thinks that she has found this kid. The first book really tackles trans rights. The second 2 books, while trans rights are part of it, it's more women's rights, let's say. Like I said, there's a lot of misogynistic language because there is like a separate thing that's like trying to kickstart this big, bad, terrible thing. And it's like a men's group or a subsect that thinks that men are actually like the ones who should be in charge of everything. So this book I was really worried going into it because it had been a couple of years since I'd read the first one. And while I loved the first one, I was afraid that time had maybe hyped up that story. It did not. I fell head over heels back into this story. It did help. I know I've mentioned it when I've talked about this book before. But at the very beginning, there's a who's who section, which is a couple of pages long, and it reminds you exactly who everybody is and who's important. There are elements to this world that are like the gods that these people believe in that I didn't quite grasp until I read the who's who section, and that helped a lot. So that helps me kind of understand the world that I didn't quite grasp in the first book. But like, I can't really say a whole lot about this because again, it's the second, and like the first book ends in a very big dramatic reveal. I wasn't sure what Juno Dawson puts in her books, but like they are literally crack. Because this, I was hooked immediately. There isn't anything incredibly like amazing about the writing in the sense of like I could pinpoint things that I liked about it. I think there's just something about the characters and the way that she crafts a story that like sucks you in, and I cannot stop reading. Like I was on the edge of my seat while I was reading this book. It was amazing. The next book I picked up was Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, which I gave 4.5 stars to. Trigger warnings in this book for mentions of suicide. So this book is very brain bendy. We follow a woman who the book starts on Halloween or the day before Halloween. Either way, it's spooky, and she's waiting up with her husband for their son to come home. And she sees him kind of come out of the woods on their street, and this other man kind of comes out of the woods and he stabs him. And she's like, well, I don't, what? And then she is so distraught by this, and like obviously her kid goes to the police station and all this kind of stuff. And so she goes to sleep that night trying to figure out like what is going on, and wakes up and it's the day before. And so she kind of relives her entire life because what I assumed was a Groundhog Day situation, which she just relives the day that her son kills someone over and over again. That's not true. When she wakes up, she keeps moving back in time. So the next day she wakes up and it's been 2 days before her son kills somebody. And then the next day it's weeks before, and then years before. And so she kind of pinpoints that the reason she's going back in time is to learn things and maybe try to figure out how to stop her son. And the days that have been picked are important for some reason. So she's trying to figure out what it is. And it is surprisingly good. Like I started this book going, what on earth are we getting into? Because it was very time bendy, and I don't always love those stories. I can enjoy a good time travel and a good time trippy story, but like sometimes they take a lot of brain power for me, and I was not expecting how much brain power this book was going to take since she kept moving back in the future or in the past. And so like I stopped trying to pay attention to how many weeks, months, years had passed because my brain couldn't compute what was going on. I will say it did take me about 40 to 50% of the book to really get invested because, like I said, it was just kind of the same thing over and over again. We weren't really learning. We were learning like little things, but we weren't learning a ton of things. And then about 40 to 50% of the way through, we got another perspective that changed the entire story. And so what was so interesting about this book was that every single time I would come up with a theory, within pages, it would be disproved. And I'd be like, okay, so that doesn't work. And then like 2 chapters later, something would happen which would make me rethink that theory could actually be the case. And it would happen like that over and over again, where I would have all these different theories of what I think was going to happen. So I kept having all these moments of like, what the heck is going on? I also found it really interesting because our main character is a mother, that there's a lot of conversation about motherhood in this book, because she spends the majority of this book trying to figure out how to stop her son, try to get involved in her son's life more to see if there's something that she could have done to prevent this. And she discovers the little cracks in her life where she feels like she could have been a better mom. And she's not a bad mom by any stretch of the imagination. She's a very good mom. It brought a lot of conversation to that feeling of mother guilt, and the feeling that you're never doing enough. And so like she had to struggle with that through a lot of this book, and then did come to terms with the fact that like she was a good mother and she accepted that she was a good mother, and she just couldn't be there 100% for her son for one reason or the other. And then like it was just a really interesting conversation. And I've looked into other books by this author, and I think almost the entirety of her backlist, not everything, but almost everything, the main character is a mother, and something is happening to a kid, or um, something is happening because of their kid. And so, like, I don't know if Julie McAllister's a mom herself, but I would believe it because of the amount of books that it looks like have this mother character as the main thing. And this is the first book I've read by this author, so I don't know if this is a conversation that happens in other books, but like it was very prominent in this book. And I found that very interesting because while her son is 18 by the end, I think 18, 16 or 18, somewhere in there, by the end, like when he kills somebody, like when the book starts, and you kind of go back in his life a little bit. And my kid's only one. So, like, we have a very different look on motherhood at the moment. There was a lot of stuff that she was saying that I feel like I could relate to. So, super trippy, super bizarre. Loved it. All right, the next two I'm going to do together, which is volumes 9 and 10 of Cherry Magic by Yu Toyota. Both of these got 4.5 stars. So starting with 9 first, I did have a little bit of a different experience with these two because 9 didn't feel like a filler novel, but it also felt like a filler novel. And I don't know how to explain that because, like, it's a novel before a really big life things happened in the 10th volume. And in the 9th volume, it felt like not a lot was happening, but we still got really deep conversations between our main couple. We still got a lot of important things that I'm sure will later come into play. And it didn't have the feeling of a filler novel, but I feel like it kind of was a filler novel based on the lack of stuff happening. What I did like about the 9th volume a lot is that we have our main couple, that's who we're following, but there's a side couple that's like a friend who's also going through similar situations, and they take a little bit more center stage in this one. And I really like that because I like their story as well. So, like, I think they're going to be a little bit a bigger role moving forward, or at least I hope so. So it was really cool to see them have their moment as well in this book, which is why I felt like a filler, but based on the trajectory of the plot, we needed a book here, so I could get it. But that's why I think it didn't get a full 5 because it was like a weird experience because I enjoyed my time with it, and I feel like there's some stuff in there that was really important and things that were talked about, but it also felt like, okay, we just have this moment before like the volume that we all really wanted, which was 10. Which again, I can't talk a lot about because it'll spoil a lot of the series. But I love this one. I'm really excited to see where we go because there's still 4 more volumes. Again, I don't know if 14 is it or if 14 is just what is out at the moment, but there's still 4 more volumes. And so, like, a lot of the time, 10 would be the end. The end game, an amazing thing happened. Let's stop it here. But we're going to see more. We're going to see like the what happens next. And I am very excited to see about the what happens next. This is also the first volume where we talk about how difficult it is for them to be a couple, because in this world, it has never, if there's ever any complications with them or like people reacting to their relationship, it is never about them being 2 men. They're worried about that, and they're worried about what their friends are going to think, but their friends or family never have a problem with them being 2 men. Any other problems that they would have are things like, well, you got together really, really quickly, or like the normal things that you would expect. But the fact that this is a gay relationship usually doesn't have a problem with that. This is the first volume where we see a possible problem with that because they are looking at apartments and like trying to figure out some place to live. And the minute that they mention they are gay, it becomes a much smaller pool to choose from. And it's not a big conversation, and it's not a conversation that like talks really in depth about a lot of the issues. It's just like a thing that is mentioned that they're like, we're going to have to get over this hurdle, and then they move on with their lives. So I don't know if there's a statement the author is trying to make with that or not, but like it is interesting to me that it is 10 volumes in, and this is the first time we're actually seeing any sort of conflict with them being in a male-male relationship. I just found that really interesting, and I don't know if we're going to see more of that in the future or if this is just them talking about a couple of things and kind of mentioning the culture of the world a little bit. The next book that I picked up was the third and final book in the HMRC series, Human Rites by Juno Dawson. I love this book. Although this one got 4 stars, it was not my favorite in the series. There was something about this, and I do not know why, because I picked it up relatively quickly after the second one, so I didn't need like a refresher or anything. It'd been like 2 No, it'd been like a week between the two. I would have picked it up right away, except for I had a book club book that I needed to get to. But there was just something about this that I felt very disconnected by. But it was still a really good book. It was a very good conclusion. I liked how it ended. There's some trippy stuff that happens at the end of this. I just found it very interesting. And I liked seeing how things got wrapped up and seeing a look back, because there is a lot of like full circle moments in this book where we look back at things that happened in the first book, or we revisit moments from the first book, and or things from the past, and seeing that I really like. The thing that I noticed about this book specifically, and I don't know why it took me all 3 books to get to this one because they're all written the same way, but Juno Dawson has a very funny writing style, and she has like very sarcastic at times, and that's the way that she's been her entire series. And I don't know why I like didn't pinpoint it, but for some reason while I was reading this book specifically, I noticed I was laughing out loud a noticeable amount, and I was like, this book is written the same way as the other 2. I don't know why it took me this long, or like why I didn't process it until now, but like I have no idea. But I still I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. Ooh, trigger warnings in this book for abortion and mentions of suicide, so just kind of be aware of that. This is not like the most fun series. It definitely tackles a lot of really hard topics, but this is the culmination of a lot of things, and this one gets particularly witchy and trippy, especially in the magic part. Like this entire series is a fantasy series, but like this is the book where I feel like we notice that the most. So I really liked it. I'm glad that I have completed the series, and this was a very satisfying conclusion to me. The next book I picked up was Devil in Spring, which is the 3rd book in the Ravenels series by Lisa Kleypas. I gave this one 5 stars. This one might be my favorite book of the month. Maybe. This one follows Pandora, who is one of the younger 2 sisters, and she finds herself, unfortunately, in a very compromising position. She is at a ball. Like, she doesn't care. She's got a twin. Her twin is the one who wants like a season, and so she's going along with it for her twin since she doesn't cause any scandal or anything. But she is creating board games, and that's what she wants to do with her life. She's going to create a company. She doesn't ever plan on getting married. She moves on. She's a friend who had a rendezvous at a ball and left an earring that her husband gave her, and it's like his grandmother's jewelry, and so she agrees to go pick it up, and it's stuck in a settee. So she's in the settee, butt in the air, and this guy named Gabriel comes in, who is a known rake, and he sees that she is struggling and helps her out, but it looks inappropriate, and they get walked in on by the host of the party as well as one of his friends, and his friend tries to defuse the situation, and the host is not having any of it. So they agree to, basically, he invites her entire family to come stay with him. Well, his dad invites her entire family to come stay with him for about a week, because they both are like, we need to get out of London. Everyone is, all they're doing is asking if we're getting married, when we're getting married, are we engaged yet, blah, 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 blah. And like, she has basically said, I refuse to get married, and he has offered to marry her, even though it's not what he wants, because he's a good person. And so they spend a week at his estate in the countryside getting along and trying to figure out basically if it's if this marriage is something that they both want, and if it is, great. If it's not, basically they're both families are like, we'll accept that, and we'll see what happens. So I really liked this story, and I wasn't sure going in, because Pandora is one of the younger siblings that we've seen in the last couple of books, and she is very young, and she reads very young, and she sounds very young in the audiobooks, and she is, I want to say, 18 or 20, somewhere in there. Like, she's not that young. She just acts and sounds young because she hasn't been exposed to the world very much. And so I was very nervous going into that, because obviously it's a historical romance. There's going to be romance. There's going to be some smutty scenes. There's going to be some more adult content. How is this going to be handled by someone who basically acts like a child? And I think it was handled just right, because she still kind of has that childlike wonder about her and not quite understanding what's going on. And Gabriel comes in with a very worldly understanding, but he likes her. And one of my favorite things, and I've been able to read a lot of books lately like this, which is why I keep mentioning it, is that she he doesn't change her. He loves the fact that she looks at the world differently. And there's a lot of books where like the guy or the male or the female, or whoever the leads are, will change something about themselves fundamentally to create a romance that works. And while they do compromise on things, he doesn't try to change who she is at all. He is happy to help her with her business. He understands that like this is an important thing for her, and like she is not going to give this up, and he doesn't want that. He likes the way she looks at the world. He likes this childlike wonder. So she's very imaginative. She's like, he is. Fun story, I think I forgot to mention this, is that his family, his mother and father, were the main couple in the Wallflower series, the third book, Devil in Winter, I think it was called. So it's their oldest son. So he's got like many younger siblings, and seeing her interact with his younger siblings, he loves that. And so like there's just this beautifulness between them where they're very real. They have these very real conversations, but also the banter is immaculate. I adored this book. Like we're only 3 books in, and I didn't feel like this was a series I needed to own physically, but I might need to own a couple of books physically, and this would be one of them, because I just really, really adored their romance. It was so cute. It was so perfect. I like flew through this book in a couple of days. Like I'm buddy reading with my friend Taylor, and we had charted out like read this much, a day for a week, and I think I did way more than that. Not at the beginning, but like once we got really into the story, I think I plowed through like the second half in a day because I was obsessed. Amazing. Perfection. I loved the romance. I loved the story. There was a really good plot along with the really good romance. 5 stars. I have no negative things to say. All right, the next 3 I'm going to do together because it is the first 3 volumes of Giant Days. This is a graphic novel series that I picked up from my used book warehouse a very long time ago when I was really into graphic novels. They had the first 3 volumes, so I went ahead and picked them up. I decided to use this one for a prompt on my TBR basket that I had reworked. You would have seen that in my September TBR. But I decided, since I had these 3 volumes, I was just going to go ahead and read all 3 because I didn't know if this was going to be a series for me. And if it is, fantastic. But if it's not, then I can unhaul these and make space. I know they're not very much space, but I can make space for some other things. So I gave all 3 of these 3 stars. Yes. What I found really interesting about this series is it basically follows 3 girls. They're actually all on the cover here. And they meet in college. And they're very different aesthetics. They're very different people, but they become really close friends really, really quickly. And the first book kicks off when it's been, I think, like 3 or 4 weeks into the college year. And they're already besties. And this story is a little bit slice of life. Like sometimes there are overarching plots across some of the chapters, but a lot of these are just these 3 friends and the different shenanigans that they get into. When I was going into the first one, I felt like this was a really chaotic, disjointed story because A, why are we starting 3 weeks in when they're already friends? I get maybe not wanting to show them friends to make it easier and just like make us, they're friends, move on. But like it feels like make it maybe year 2 of college or something like that, where like it's not so close to the beginning of college where it's clear that you chose this for a reason, and why not just make it the beginning of college? It's so close to the beginning of college. Why? Just throw in a volume of them becoming friends or something like that. So it felt very strange in that way. And I think because of the whole slice of life plot, which I didn't realize was going to be the case, it felt like it lacked direction and where it was going. Once we got to the second 2 volumes, I kind of had an idea of what was going on, and it made a little bit more sense. There was, I feel like at moments, it's contemporary. This is a contemporary story, but it has moments where you go, is this fantastical? So I am going to unhaul all of these because while I did enjoy my time and I'm glad I read them, maybe I'll pick up another volume. I think there are 14 volumes, but like I am not going to reread these. These were just kind of okay for me. They were fine. They weren't like the most amazing thing I've ever read. I did like the friendships in them. I thought they were really cool, especially having these people be so vastly different, but show how much they cared about one another. There's some relationships that are growing. And I don't know. I kind of feel meh about the series. So it was good. I liked seeing something set in college. I liked seeing them figuring out life a little bit, but it was very random. I will say the third one ended on a relatively interesting cliffhanger. So if I have the time in the future, maybe I'll pick up the fourth one just to see what happens. But it definitely follows them. The series is complete, and it follows them throughout college, because I know the very last volume has a picture of them throwing their caps from their cap and gowns. So I don't need to hold on to these, is what I'm saying. So I'm glad I read these, because I was curious, and I've had them for a very long time. And now I can give them back to the book warehouse, and somebody else can love them. The next one I'm not going to talk too much about, because I did an entire vlog on this one, which was Watermoon, by Samantha Soto Yambao. I'll leave it linked above. It is a spoilery vlog, so just warning about that. But it was for my Hyped Book Chronicles. So this book, trigger warnings in this book for abandonment of a parent. So like that's a really big theme in here. This book follows our main two characters, Hana and Ki. And Hana and her father run this pawn shop, which in Tokyo, there's this ramen shop, and people line up for the ramen shop. And when you open the door, 90% of them go into the ramen shop. But there is that 10% that come in and they open the door and realize that they're in a pawn shop. And it is a pawn shop where you can sell a regret. And basically what happens is, like, whatever that regret is, person, a moment in time, everybody is different. You receive a gift in return, and you go about your life, and it's as if that regret is no longer weighing you down. So the book starts with Hana's father basically retiring and giving the shop to her, and now she's in charge of it. And so she wakes up, and her father is missing. The shop looks like it has been robbed and ramshackled, and there is a regret from the file room missing. And that's a no-no, because people come every few months to kind of pick these regrets. And as this is happening, the door opens and this guy, he walks in. And instead of coming in to get rid of a regret, he offers to help. And it's the two of them on this ridiculous journey to figure out what the heck is going on. There's a lot of twists and turns with this book. I gave this 4 stars. It was going to be a 3-star for a very long time, because it took me well over halfway to really care about what was happening. I think the problem is this is very whimsical. This is a good book if you are someone who likes the whimsical side of like middle grade, except for the fact that it has this very whimsical story. They're jumping through puddles, and that's how they get to locations, and they ride on a song to get. It's very strange. But then you get to the end, and you realize that there's this current of very darkness underneath everything, and it takes a turn real fast. And so when we get to the end and we start kind of unraveling the twists and turns of this book, it gets dark fast. And I found that part interesting. So like that kept me on my toes, because I was reading it for this vlog and I was like, do I care? I think I care. I don't know, blah, 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 blah. And then we got to about 60% and things started looking a little sinister, and things started happening. And I was like, what? Hold on. And the ending, I think, is worth it. But I also don't know if this book as a whole is worth the hype that I saw it getting. I don't know if it's still, I feel like it was the beginning of the year when it came out, and a lot of people were really excited about it, and I just kind of was like, I mean, whatever. And then I found it at my used bookstore, and I was like, okay, well, this is a sign. I did, and I'm glad I did, but like, I'm going to unhaul this because I'm never going to read it again. Because like, it took me so long. I cannot tell you how long it took me to get through this book where I cared about what was going on, because it was a long time. But on the flip side of that, the writing was incredibly beautiful. There was things that like they were saying, especially at the very beginning of the book, that I thought about highlighting. And of course, I wish I had like at least marked them so I could read to you kind of a couple of the moments. But there were things that like, because this is very otherworldly, and then you have like a human, Kai, popping in and helping them out in a world that he does not understand. They have a very different way of looking at the world. So she's a very childlike, I mean, she's not, she's an adult. And there are some moments, like it's not described by any stretch of the imagination, but there are a couple of moments where more adult things happen. And that felt very strange, because like she felt like a child. A very smart child, but still a child. And so I felt a little iffy about the romance by the end of it, I was on board and I had come full circle about it. But at the beginning, I was like, what? Like, I knew this was going to turn into a romance just based on like a couple of things that they were doing and a couple of things that they were like thinking about each other. But I was like, I don't care. Like, why is this here? And by the end, it made sense and I understood why it was in the plot. I think the end, what am I trying to say? I think the end is worth the payoff. Um, if you have the time to dedicate. And maybe you are someone who will love a book like this. It's very cozy and fantastical. Like, gets very strange very quickly. And maybe you will enjoy the beginning where I didn't. And that's awesome. And I love that. But I feel like there was just a lot for me that it took me so long to get into. But the ending was worth it. The writing is amazing, so I definitely want to look into other things by this author to see if there's something else out there that maybe sounds more interesting to me, because the way she writes her stories is just immaculate. But this one as a whole, even though it got 4 stars, it was because the end. Like, it was a solid 3-star, low 3-star for like most of this book until we got to some of the end moments and I saw the story coming together. I don't really know what I think. It was fine. Like, the moral of the story, I think, is that it was just kind of eh. I then picked up my other 5-star, which if you had told me going into this book that it was going to be a 5-star, I would have laughed in your face. And that is These Summer Storms by Sarah McLean. This book I picked up because it says summer. It sounded interesting. It's got like an inheritance game surrounding the plot. We follow our main character, Alice, who is one of the 4 Storm siblings. Her father is this big magnate, like he's got loads of money, super, super, super rich, and owns, basically it sounds like he owns this world's version of Apple. So he's big in the world, and something happens a few years ago, like 5 years ago, and he and Alice and her dad have a fight, and she gets kicked off this private island they have. She gets cut off from the family. She goes and lives her own life, and she is so content about it. This book starts with her father passing away, and she comes for the funeral, and right before the funeral, this guy shows up to read the will and they discover that like there's one last game that the father has given them. They all get a letter. Almost all of them get a letter that says, here's the thing that you have to do. And if one of you doesn't do it, then nobody gets the inheritance. And they are basically these 4 siblings and the mom trying to figure out how to do these things. And Alice's task is just to stay for a week, which to her siblings is like, that's the easiest thing in the world. You have no right to complain. But this is literally torture for her. Like, she hates the way she was brought up. She hates all the memories of this island. And there's also a romance looming between her and this guy who has been tasked to hand out all the stuff. Trigger warnings in this book for sexual assault, death of a parent, toxic family, very toxic family, and abortion. This story is about a very toxic family. So I went in knowing I was going to be stressed. I did not realize that I would be on the edge of my seat, stressed and angry the entire time I read this book until the very end, when some things started to make sense. And so at first, there's like I said, there's a romance in here, which I was like, this is dumb. Why is it here? I mean, yay, romance. I like romance, but it feels kind of silly to throw this into the works, except for just to make it even more complicated. And then when we got to the end, it actually was pretty integral to the plot. So I was stressed. I was angry the entire time. I knew that going in. This book was just really hard to get through. I purposely would put it down sometimes. Like, I thought about reading it before bed, but then I knew I would get really stressed and angry right before bed. So I decided not to read it before bed at times. It definitely has a very summer feel because they're on this private island. And I just found it very, very interesting to see these 4 characters, specifically the siblings. I mean, the mom is part of it too, but these 4 siblings being pushed to the brink and being forced to be in the same place as each other for a week. And at first they all fall back into the old habits of, bickering and being siblings and all this kind of stuff. And then as we go through the week, secrets come out and things are discovered, and it makes them want to be better people and want to be better siblings. And it's very interesting to see because there's some characters in here that, like, I'm thinking specifically the older brother. He is like, I felt going into this, once I met him, I was like, he's unredeemable. We're going to hate him up until the end. And I still don't love him at the end, but he became much better than I ever thought he could be. And so it was really, really interesting seeing the dynamic of these siblings and then basically being forced to figure things out. So I can't tell you why this was a 5-star. Like, nothing about this book should have been a 5-star, but I was hooked on these characters. I was hooked on the story. I didn't expect any of the twists, and well, there's one thing I predicted, but I predicted it like a couple of pages before it was revealed. I don't know. I feel like there was a couple of things. That's not true. I predicted a couple of chapters before it was revealed, but either way, there was just a couple of things that really started making me rethink a lot of the story. And the mom is also terrible, and it was really nice seeing like the siblings band together and stand up to the mom. There's just a lot of things about this book that shouldn't have worked but did. So if you like very toxic families that kind of impartially get their what they're due but also figure things out on their own, I don't know. I just thought it was very well done. The next book that I picked up was my Lorraine Heath buddy read, which is In One of a Viscount, which is the third and final book in the Chessmen's series. This is the most recent book by Lorraine Heath. I gave this 3.5 stars. I felt just kind of meh about the story, to be honest. This book follows our main two characters, Rook and Leonora. Rook is one of the chessmen. And Leonora and her brother and her mom are American, and they come over from America because her father passed away and left the business to her brother, even though she is the brains behind everything. And so she is creating a writing machine, which I'm gonna tell you, it took me 75% of this book to realize that they were describing a typewriter, which is really embarrassing. They're trying to market this typewriter, so they've come over looking for investors. Her mother is absolutely terrible and is only there to get her daughter married to a lord because she wants to be in the right circle. She is not quiet about it. Every time she meets a new person, she asks his title, what he is he the oldest son? If he's not, okay, you're not worth my time. Oh, are you the oldest son? How's your father doing? Oh, is he dying? Fantastic, we want you. Like, she is absolutely terrible. And the son is not, I mean, he's better, but he's actually kind of worse because he seems to be on her side, and then throughout the book we realize that he's really not on his sister's side. And then you have the character of Rook, which the book starts with the two of them at one of these clubs, where she has asked to be kissed because she's like, I'm never going to get married. People think I'm odd because my brain is so very engineer brain, and I bore people. So I'm just curious what this is like. And I've had a lot to drink, so I would like a kiss. So she goes to a room, and Rook's stepbrother actually owns this club. And he asks Rook, because he's a little understaffed right now, can you just go in and give her a kiss? If you don't like it, you give her 3 seconds of your life. And he goes, fine. And then the kiss kind of reawakens something in him. And then they meet again later because she and her brother are trying to get the chessmen to become investors in this business. I liked the tension, and I liked the connection that Rook and Leonora have, especially from the get-go, because he sees her for who she really is. She has such low self-esteem because she knows that she's considered odd. Her brain works a little bit differently than the others, and she's just trying to get money from people as investors. And Rook is the first person that actually seems to care about her as a person, and she feels like she can be herself in his presence. And on the reverse side, Rook's father is dying, and he is an absolutely horrendous person. He slept around, did not make it's a secret that he slept around. His mother just happens to be the one that his father married after a while, so he is the heir, but he has a ridiculous amount of siblings that he doesn't even know exist, but he's met a couple of them. So he still talks to some, but basically his father would sleep around. If someone got pregnant, he would take that kid and give it to somebody else. And usually it was lower income families because he didn't want these kids to survive. I'm telling you, this guy is terrible. Rook is afraid that he has that in him. And so he refuses to get married because he doesn't want to be his father. So that's where my confusion lies, because his whole thing was, I refuse to be like my dad. I refuse to be like my dad. So I get him not wanting to create a bunch of kids with people, or let his lust for certain people get in the way of things. But the fact that he doesn't want to get married at all is what confuses me. And I don't know if I just missed something, because it was just the connection for him of I cannot get married. I refuse to get married. I refuse to get married. I refuse to get married. why? And so you have two people, Rook, whose intentions are honorable, but I don't fully understand why he's so adamant about certain things. And then Leonora, who is just so hard to be in her brain for most of this book because she's so down on herself. And every time Rook does something, she's like, he's just being nice. Their relationship is beautiful, and I like seeing the two of them pull out the best in each other, but there were still a lot of complications and a lot of things that I feel like I couldn't understand why, the motivations, I guess. I couldn't understand why things were happening. And that kind of ties into my biggest question with the book, which is this felt very different than anything else I've read by Lorraine Heath. Lorraine Heath, like I've said many times, every time a book of hers has come up, I talk about how I love her writing, how I love her complex characters, how I feel like these characters are very real because you kind of feel like you have all these different layers with them. And while these characters are more complex than some other characters that I've read in historical romance, I feel like it lacked that complexity and those layers that I'm used to seeing from Heath. So it felt very surface level as far as writing goes when I was used to these fantastically well-rounded characters. And I feel like either I missed something, or which is entirely possible, or it just wasn't there in this one. So it's not like the worst book I've ever read. I don't want you to think that. I still had a good time. There were times where I was like, why am I reading this? And there were times where I was obsessed with the romance. So like I kind of went up and down, which is why I feel like 3 stars is a good one, because I don't really know what I think about this book. I know I just kind of like talked a lot about this book, but I don't really know what I think. And I liked parts of it and I didn't like parts of it. So it was one of those very like contradictory reading experiences. And the final book that I read was Welcome to Pawnee by Jim O'Hare. This was my nonfiction. I gave this 4 stars. If this book sounds interesting to you, I totally recommend getting the audiobook as well, because it is narrated by Jim O'Hare. But as I was going through, he has these sections, and I'm going to find one, where he has reached out to other people. For example, here's a section where he reached out to Adam Scott. So this whole section is written by Adam Scott. In the audiobook, I'm trying to find like Mike Schur, for example, was a co-creator. So he would have a section like that for Mike Schur, and you would have Mike Schur in the audiobook narrating that section. Not everybody in this book was narrated by their actual selves. I think all the crew was, anybody he talked to who was on the crew, but any of the cast members were probably too busy to do the audiobook. But it was really interesting to get his look, because this is the story of Parks and Rec from Jim O'Hare's perspective. And he really did his due diligence where he collected a lot of information where like the lens is, here's Jim's story. Oh, here's a side story from the co-creator that like relates to what we're saying. Okay, great. I'm going to go back to the story now. And it's less about Jim as a person and more about his experience on the show and what it was like to be on Parks and Rec. I assume anyone who picks this up would be a Parks and Rec fan. Like, why would you pick this up if you didn't care about Parks and Rec? But if you did pick this up and you weren't as well versed in Parks and Rec, or you picked this up because you liked Jim O'Hare as a actor and you wanted to know about this portion of his life, he references specific seasons and episodes a lot. So it'll be like, oh, we were filming season 3, episode 4, which is titled this. And being a huge Parks and Rec fan, I know exactly what episode that is. So everything that he was saying makes sense. But if you are not as well versed in the Parks and Rec world, that can be very confusing because he'd be referencing things and you're like, what is he talking about? So it's one of those, like, I assume that you would only pick this book up if you were a big fan. But if for some reason you did pick this up and you weren't a big fan, you're going to be confused at times. So this was like a really interesting experience. I liked seeing this story. It was very short. Like I said, the audiobook is the way to go. It has pictures scattered throughout it. It starts with him getting the job and it ends with the final season and the very, very, very end. It was fun. Like I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't like the most amazing thing. It's not the most in-depth thing ever, but I like the idea. I love the way it was formatted. I liked seeing a lot of the stories. A lot of the stories I did know, but there were definitely some stories in here that I didn't know at all. And that was really interesting to see because I feel like I am someone who likes to know the backstory of things. So I usually go when I find the backstory of things. So when I read books like this, I've usually already know the stories they're going to tell. And this one, that's true for some parts because they were doing the Parks and Recollection rewatch podcast, him and Greg Levine, who was a writer on the show. And they would tell stories there. So some of the stories that are in this book I've already heard because they were on this podcast. But a lot of the stories near the later half of the season or the series, I did not know. I liked my time. I'm really glad that I read this. I don't know if I'll ever reread it because, like, I don't know. Nonfiction is weird for me, where I feel like I've gotten what I wanted from this, but I love the concept of this book, and I think it was very well done. And the Parks fan in me is very, very happy with this book and to have read this book. So that is how I ended my month or my reading in August. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I tried to be quick, but I'm realizing I was very much not quick in my thoughts. So thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed. As always, feel free to leave your thoughts down below if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in today's video, or just let me know something that you have read in the month of August that you love and need to rave about, or that you hated and need to rant about, or just a book you're currently reading. Either, all of those are fine. But if you want to comment something and you're not sure what to comment, comment a wave, because there's water in this one and there's water in this one, and those are the two that are next to me and I can see them. So comment the wave emoji. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so remember to check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.